Today we're looking at a very interesting conversation, and I want to welcome you once again to Uganda Diaspora Show. My name is Lynn, Komugisha, and I'm your host today. We're looking at education in Uganda, the Uganda education system versus studying abroad, especially in developed countries, and what lessons does Uganda have to carry from this? But also a look at the education system in Uganda. What is wrong with it? And how best can we, address these challenges that we encounter? With us today is Dr. Milton Allimadi, an educator. We were supposed to have Dr. Kamunyu Muhwezi, but he'll be joining us later. We have Francis Kamuhanda, who was a teacher turned politician, where he will tell us why that happened, and also Miriam Kyomugasho. I welcome you once again. It's been a minute, and let's just get into it. Francis, I want to begin with you because you were previously a teacher, and I'm wondering why you left teaching and how you left it. I mean, how did that go for you?
Oh, thank you, Lynn. I made a break because I'm driving. As you've stated, I'm still a teacher. Once you are a teacher forever. And I still follow education conversations in Uganda and where my input is needed, most especially from the line schools that I used to manage. I'm still part and parcel. I would like also to thank the fellow panelists, especially Dr. Allimadi, who is well conversant with the education system of the US. And so it will be a good exchange to borrow a leaf. But if I may go back to your question, our education system in Uganda, like as I've always said, it is all about the institution of leadership that does not give a well conversant strategic move in as far as everything is concerned, including education. And yet, for any country to prosper, you have to get the education question right. For now, I will stop there, and I will leave for other panelists to also come in as we progress with the conversation. Thank you.
Right, you're still a teacher. You haven't told us if you're still teaching, but that's okay. We'll get back to that later.
I'm teaching, Lynn. Online, I hold classes online. Generally, even I teach primary school level online from here. And second.
Wow, that's great. Now, Milton Allimadi is an adjunct professor in Africana Studies at John Jay College of Journalism, Columbia University. Yes, thank you for that correction, Milton. And this actually brings me to you. When you take a look at our education system, if you will allow me, recently we had released, we got results of the last year of how students performed last year, and there were issues, and we'll come back to that shortly. But I need to pick your mind, Dr. Milton. When you look at the education system in Uganda, what do you think is wrong?
Okay, thank you once again for having me on your very esteemed show. And also thank you and welcome to my fellow panelists. Just a slight correction. It's not Dr. Milton Allimadi. It's Milton Allimadi, adjunct professor at John Jay College and Columbia University. But I think we need to approach it from a much broader perspective. When we ask the questions about the results, for example, the results of what? What exactly are we assessing? See? I think we're approaching the whole conversation, the whole system of education, not only in Uganda, by the way, it's an African problem, from the wrong perspective. We have to ask, first of all, what is being taught and for what purpose? You see? There could be a reason why students perform poorly. And there are many factors, of course. It goes back to the quality of the education. It goes back to the teachers themselves. You know, it's very hard to teach when you're not getting paid adequately, or sometimes not being paid at all for many months. So you have absenteeism, not only of students, but of the teachers themselves, right? But a bigger challenge that we face in Uganda specifically, and in Africa generally, is what kind of education are we really instilling in our children? And for what purpose? What are we trying to do? Are we trying to transform our societies? Because we can't ignore our history. We came from a colonial legacy, and the education system was tailored to make us fit in the colonial production system, basically as people that are serving the interests of colonialism and exploitation. Now, after colonialism, did we transform the education system to be much more appropriate to what kind of Uganda we want to produce and what kind of African countries we want to produce? And the answer is clearly no. And I go back to what the late Mwalimu Julius Nyerere of Tanzania said. Said education has to be liberating from ignorance. That's only one part. But then the second part, it has to make us productive to produce what we want to produce, what kind of society we want to create, whether it's in Tanzania, Uganda, or in Africa. And I think we have not yet addressed that question. So we are still pretty much maintaining the old colonial system. We are people who, we worship Europe and what Europeans have accomplished in Europe. And nowadays we worship the United States. We worship China. Everyone else, except looking back at what does Africa really need. Because we cannot transform our African condition if our students are not being transformed by the education system. So Mwalimu Nyerere said, the problem we have is that most of us want to get those degrees and the diplomas so that we can hang it up on the wall and see, now I have achieved. I belong to an elite class of people that can now be referred to as the educated ones. But what are we doing to transform Uganda, or to transform Africa? And then the final words of wisdom that he also shared, that I repeat, was that if we teach science, for example, it can't be just teaching science and said, oh, I've studied science. It should be science and technology, so that the science can be converted to producing things that help us as African people. So what is the use to say, oh, I'm a scientist, I've learned science, when you can't apply that science to produce physical things to help your people in Africa? So those to me are the most serious challenges. We have to first decide, what do we want education to accomplish? Once we've decided that, then we can decide on what is the type of education that we need. Not because, oh, look at the English education system. Look at what the United States is doing. Look at what Canada is doing. They're doing things that are appropriate for England, for Canada, and for the United States. We need to do things that are appropriate for Uganda, and we are not doing that.
Wow, indeed. That's interesting. And I like that you take us in that direction. Miriam, we know that our education system, first of all, has 7 years of primary, and you do primary education for 7 years, do 6 years of secondary education, and that is divided into 4 years of lower secondary and 2 years of upper secondary. And then we have about 3 to 5 years of post-secondary education. The question here raised, people have been arguing it is a long time. You spend a long time in school, and when you get out, chances of you getting a job are really very low. And I'll still ask you the same question. In your view, because you are studying abroad, in your view, what is wrong with our education system?
I want to re-echo what Milton said. The question is our education system fit for us as Africans, as Ugandans. You see, each economy curates a system of education that is going to serve a particular economy, a particular a geographical setting. So if you are in Africa, if you say go to India and study about India and Calcutta and how to control the slum problem in India, how it might apply to help you sort out, say, Kampala issue, but to what extent? Because the socioeconomic setting is totally different. So the issue, the problem, the question we should be asking ourselves is the education we are feeding our children good enough to make them effective in Africa today, in Africa tomorrow, in Uganda right now? Can they transform the economy? Can they transform themselves? Can they use it to develop wherever they are, whether they leave Uganda and settle anywhere? Is that education system equipping them enough to survive as global citizens? So the challenge I found, okay, the difference I found, the education in USA and compared to that of Uganda, I mean, it's more like comparing tomatoes to oranges, but we can try. But it's like the scholars, they are equipped to fit in their system, that even when the minimum standard of education is high school, like if you have high school diploma, you can work anywhere successfully. But in Uganda, it's like even when you are a graduate, you can't function anywhere. And that's why you see like employers are saying, oh, Ugandans are unemployable. But it's not even about employment. It's about you functioning and sustaining yourself as an adult. Is the education you are given enough, for instance, to give yourself first aid? Is your education enough for you to make you create your own job? Is the education you are given enough for you to help you create a solution to a problem in your society, the society you are living in right now, whether you are in Karamoja or whether you are in Kampala or whether you are in Saudi Arabia? It's actually the way we are so helpless. I mean, Saudi Arabia came to my mind, saying like that's how useless our education is. Our graduates can't even function in Uganda, that we have to ship them out as maids in Saudi Arabia. Why do we waste resources training them? We are training them to do what? And those are the issues we should be asking ourselves. I know most parents in Uganda get frustrated and say, oh, if our education cannot work, let's send children abroad, and then they end up paying expensively for some education. And then you think that that education is going to help them survive well in Uganda. But again, like Milton said, that education works for people over there, because for them, that's their level of development, that's their level of the problem they face might not be the same, the same problems we face. And then we have this, you see, like we are emphasizing people should study science and not study history. If I were to give an example of myself, I studied in Uganda up to university level, my first degree, but I studied from Western Uganda, but I reached university level without knowing what actually happens in Northern Uganda. I had to understand Northern Uganda and Eastern during my work as an NGO worker, because that's when we were taking their social services with the resettlement and all that. But the education in Uganda is so sad that if you are in a particular area, the content you are given in school for those 13 years or so is not even enough to help you understand basically a region of Uganda, so small as it is, with 50 million people. So what are we studying for? Are we equipped? What are we training our children to be? Are they trained to be problem solvers in Uganda? Are they trained to be equipped citizens in Uganda, or we are training them to just be, and be what? I think those are some of the issues we should be asking ourselves. Are we really training our children to survive and transform Uganda or Africa?
A huge question there. Are we training our children to survive at all? Because when you look at the education system recently, allow me take you through something that happened. When they were releasing the just concluded A-level, education results, there was worry that some students were answering strange questions. They were saying, instead of answering the questions, they said, "Do not waste time. It's with me," and that's an answer in A-level. And so the education ministry is worried that there must be a huge problem. This student said that you are wasting, dear Mr. Examiner, you are still wasting time on me when there are more serious candidates. And then he goes on to say, "I'm the stone the builder refused," before listing some famous global songstresses, including Celine Dion and Mariah Carey. And now this is at A-level. And so the ministry is saying we have a problem, but they're not identifying the problem. Another candidate who scored 0 said, decided to just copy and rewrite questions several times in one of the exams. So you wonder, at A-level, you expect a student to have, grasped a lot of things, but they scored 0. Now I come back to you, Francis. When you say that our education system is there, it has been like this for ages. Recently, they're trying to change the curriculum. I don't know how that is going, but it seems to be a little stagnated. Now, Francis, in your view, and I strongly believe we have a huge problem. Is our education system addressing the challenges of our community as Uganda, as Africa, as the global community? Or is it just us going to school, studying whatever there is?
Oh, thank you, Lynn. I'll piggyback on what Dr. Allimadi and Miriam have just said. When we are designing the curriculum as educators, it must stem from the society needs. I think that is number one, what you look at. That, okay, if we are designing, we are going to teach this. What needs of society does it address? And as other panelists have already said, our education system is addressing the needs, the problems of New York City. And then you begin cramming that. And even when you cannot solve the problems of Kavari City or Mbarara. So that becomes one problem. Then when it comes to what are we passing on to the children or to the students? Is it the knowledge and skills? For Uganda, it is more of knowledge, but also which is jumbled. That's why a person will come from whether university or whichever level, and they cannot apply the skill. So when it comes to application level, 0. But also our system is in such a way that it is it's not more of an education system, it is more of a sieving mechanism to brand people. Those who don't know and those who know. And I don't necessarily agree with that. You can't tell me that a person will go through an education system for all these years and then comes out that is empty. Like as how the student you are quoting answered, that is completely empty. And then we'll have to say, don't waste time on me, or I'm the stone that was rejected. You can't tell me that it goes back to the examination. I'm one of the kind that would be interested in what the child can do than what the child can cram and reproduce. because the UNEB, let's say the examination board, doesn't know even what is taking place in class, but we entrust them to come and examine our students, and then they begin classifying them. Like generally, we have that itself is a bigger problem. I think we shall dwell into it. Like Lynn, look at the statistics. Primary living examination, they were showing they classified over 97,000, close to 100,000 students. They failed. Now that is for last year. Where are they going? We don't know. And it has been taking place for over maybe 10 years. In 10 years, we 1 million. Now, when you go to UCE, they were saying around 15,000 plus 6,000 who did not sit. So you find that the number goes to 20,000, and it has been continuing for years and years. So those ones go to society. What are they contributing? Like zero. Then we come to what the other panelists have been saying. We come now to university. You find a person who has also a bachelor's degree, does not have even a flower garden at home. Even when you tell them, can you plant flowers, a flower garden, doesn't know. The only thing is theory. So I think that, as Dr. Allimadi said, we need to go back to our societies and say, what do they need? But also putting in mind that we are operating in a global village. What do we have also to learn from other systems of education that can enrich our African type of education that we want to bring about, because we don't have it. Now, if I can go back and then remember when in 1987, that's when Uganda was thinking of what is codenamed as the government white paper on education by Centers. So it took them time to study the system we were operating in, and then they made a series of recommendations. And now one of the recommendations, which is haphazardly implemented, is the recent one where they have changed and adopted the new curriculum, cut and paste. But was this systematically followed? If we were to take that route, the answer is no. Number one, they needed to first train the teachers the pedagogical practices of what you are going to teach, but now they just jump into it, and then even teachers don't know. They are experimenting on our children. Teachers don't know what next. So the competence-based curriculum, they should have started. Like, can we now, because there was ample time now for 35 years since that report came out. I think it came out 2000, but the whole thing started in 1987. So they would have said, okay, now we are addressing the pedagogical practices. Teachers who would be coming out of college, they know how to do assessment on competence-based. And then too, we would trust also schools that that means we are doing away with UNED, so that we trust schools that, okay, once schools have made an assessment, teachers have made a correct argument, we have a transcript for this child can do ABCD, they have done practicals even at whatever level, whether primary or so on, that they are competent, that even when they don't make it secondary, they can go, and if they want to become farmers, they even know basics of plant spacing, what to do, and so on, in as far as agriculture or any other skill is concerned. And the whole thing would move on like that, even up to university. So that's what I think is the element that is lacking. But as I have always said, it all stems from political will, which is here. I do believe that at a high level, the professors and so on, the technical people who are in education, may be knowing what to do. But once the political will is here, where we have maybe the cabinet of fishermen who exactly don't know even what to fish, then it is very hard to say, okay, we can make some changes. And as Allimadi said, this cuts across Africa. Again, we will push it to the political will being ill. Even when they parade themselves as Pan-Africanists, they have not understood what even Pan-Africanism stands for. Thank you.
Right, indeed. Thank you so much. You actually highlight a lot of issues, especially the fact that they're focusing on the new competence-based curriculum. It's been around, they're testing it here and there, and so far they're still trying to, make sure that the students, get around it. It's only just started. We don't know how it is going to perform. But this brings me to you, Allimadi. The student who answered, you're wasting time with me, questions the curriculum, first of all, and because some people are saying it causes such frustrations. People are tired. You study after identifying a need that you want to solve in your community. And this is what all of you have hinted on. Do you think we need to reinvent the education system?
It's not a question of reinventing. It's a question of making it appropriate, as pretty much all of us have been saying. We need to have a national conversation on education, but we cannot have it under the current political regime. And I agree totally with Francis when he says that the political will is not there. And this applies not only to education, of course, but to all other aspects of our existence in Uganda. We are not serious about education, just like we are not serious about many issues and segments of Ugandan society. And the best evidence to prove we are not serious about education is look at who the Minister of Education is. And yet education perhaps is the most important portfolio in the world, because you're talking about transforming every individual. And I keep going back to Mwalimu Nyerere, because I think many people underestimate the amount he shared during his lifetime. He was once asked what was his definition of development. And he said development to him. And first he gave some examples. He said, well, people say, maybe you need to be wealthy, but I know millionaires who are not even happy. So it cannot just be wealth. People say health. Can we afford to have some people in society not healthy and some healthy? Well, obviously, everybody is entitled to health, even the ones who claim they don't want health to be a priority. But then he settled on this response. He said, to me, it is to make everybody, every individual, be the best possible versions of themselves. And that, to me, would be the definition of education. And we don't have that currently in Uganda. And the students who are giving those responses that you just highlighted, unfortunately, in Uganda, some in the establishment would see that as a reflection of the students' failure and incompetence, when in fact it is the other way around. To me, that student, or those students rather, because there was more than one, of course, these are their signs of protest. They knew that the answers would be read by somebody in authority, and that obviously it would be reported and people would know about that response that they gave. That to me was a deliberate response. It was an act of protest that they wanted to be publicized. So we should see it as his or her commentary on the state of education in Uganda, not as a revelation of those students' own incompetences. And let me give you a very practical example. If these students knew or suspected that if they applied themselves and they got the so-called education that is being disseminated, and that something would be waiting for them at the other side of the door. Now education has opened the door for them, and they have a job waiting for them. Do you think they would really give that kind of response? The answer is obviously no. And I go back to what Francis also said. When somebody gets 0, is that even possible? It's impossible. So that 0 was also another sign of protest. You know, the student was saying, I don't care about the questions you're asking me because I don't care about the education system, because it's not going to lead me anywhere. So that's how it should be assessed. And I hope members of the media in Uganda and politicians who are critical can also see it that way and see that we need to seriously address this issue. At the end of the day, when the political space allows us to do, at the first opportunity, we should have a national conversation on education that involves teachers, involves students, involves the administrators. Then we can come up with a practical white paper on education, not coming from the top up, people who think this is the best solution, but the people who know the best solution must involve teachers, students, and the administrators. And then, of course, the enlightened politicians.
Miriam, a protest on education. And I think this is what the Ministry of Education was trying to say, even when it was, I think, being polite about it. They were saying they're trying to figure out, is it a problem of the student having a mental problem? Is it the teachers not doing enough? Is it the system indeed? And so when Allimadi says that that this is a protest on the education system, I just want to, kind of agree with him. And I see that we are joined by Dr. Kamunyu. We'll get to him shortly. But Miriam, I wanted to ask, the quality of education in Uganda. Still, I think we're just going round and, looking at it. We haven't pointed to the actual problem that the education system is in Uganda. The quality, oftentimes we have students going to university, and when they leave university, quite a number of them come in and the employers are saying they're poor quality. What have they been doing at the university? So it turns out it is not just primary, secondary, it's also the university. So clearly the education, do you think we should overhaul the education system?
I think what Milton said, of course, the overhaul is necessary, and I understand there are processes to reform and try to adjust the education system. They go to skilling, they leave that, they go to the competence system that Francis alluded to, then they are touching this and that. But the critical issues are, we need to really go back to the basics, like, why are we using the education system we are using today? Was it formed for us? Is it appropriate for Africa? We really need to really adjust, position Africa to where it is right now and where we are coming from, and then assess the type of education we need for our future generation, because the children are really like the next generation. Even the adults can go back and re-educate themselves. I was so shocked. I was not happy. I came to USA and studied African studies. I came to learn about Africa in a way I have never been educated in while I was in Africa. Being taught by African teachers, being an African myself. I even learned about my society, Ankole, my society, Uganda, by educators in USA, not educators in Kampala, not educators in my village in Ubushenyi. And then that's where you wonder, what are we teaching children? Europe learns about Africa, the proverbial book that used to really dot our shelves. These donated books which talks about apples and snow and whatever to an African child who has never seen snow, who does not relate to snow. What are we inspiring our children with? The plastic dolls, the plastic Barbie dolls. You see, education is all around. Lynn, as a parent, what a child at home. There is formal education, there is informal education. What our elders used to be the educators of the next generation. Our leaders used to be the educators. But now, if we if we isolate education and leave it to the formal, the classroom type of education, a child is formed by what they pass, what they see in public, what they see at home, everywhere in society, what you meet. Every time you go to church, you learn something. Every time you listen to the television, you are learning something. But what is it we are teaching our children? What is it we are inspiring them with? What are we motivating them with? Corruption, ethical breakdown. One thing that really inspired me, and I wish anybody could borrow in Western economies, is the ethics. We cannot go because of course their education is totally different from ours, but the emphasis on the ethics. A child is taught to be ethical from day one, whereas here in Uganda, you even encourage students to go to Nasa Road and photocopy whatever, and just you come graduate them and say they are graduates. And then if you are a professor, Dr. Kamunyu will tell us, you emphasize that students only read your book and actually photocopy it for university classes. That's what used to happen in my school. I don't know if it's still the same. Like if you don't reproduce your lecturer's material, he's gonna say, oh, this is not good enough because you quoted a different book than what we have. And another thing is maybe a lesson we can borrow. Community libraries. They can be e-libraries, they can be the old style book libraries, but every community needs a library. Even the people who think they are educated, like you've graduated, yes, ABCD, even you have a doctorate, but learning doesn't stop. So if you go back to your community, does it have a library? Where do people go for reference? Where do people go for information? In the past, like I said, we used to have the elders, tell the young children at the fireplace, and every evening would be like an educational session. If you are in a garden, it's an educational session. But today we don't have those opportunities. We don't even meet our own parents. Our parents are busy trying to make a living, and children are being raised by television and the Scooby-Doo cartoons. Where are the libraries? Are we emphasizing teaching? If you go to Uganda today, even the National Library is dusty and almost, if it's not closed, the last time I checked, it was a building almost breaking down somewhere, and there was nobody to attend to. There were just all the newspapers, and I don't think it even exists anywhere. If you go to the topmost university in Uganda, Makerere, the books are covered by dust. That shows nobody's touching them. Because we don't encourage reading. Even in classroom, like I said, a lecturer will just come with a few photocopy handouts from their old notes, and then they don't even have time to explain even their own, shorter stuff. And then you graduate, your first class, you are educated. No wonder that the students go back and they can't function in the working space. Because what are we teaching them? It's not about even the poor curriculum we have. We are not affecting it. If you are in these first class private schools, someone is teaching you how to pass exams. You need 100 first graders to appear in newspaper. That's the intention. And your education, your knowledge development is none of their priority. Whereas, of course, it could be a case of resources, but in developed schools, that's the advantage they have. They have smaller classrooms, they have attention to detail to students. But again, if we can't afford that in Uganda, the parents should come in to cover that space. Are you reading to your kids at night? Or you just buy another cable and say, oh, watch cartoons, I'm going to sleep. What materials are you stocking at home? My father used to emphasize reading, and any gift you are going to get if he travels is going to be a book, nothing else. And he wasn't read himself. He didn't go through formal education. But he told you, if there is knowledge in this book, go and look for it. And it's that knowledge that is going to give you whatever you want. But we also have to be so clear. What type of materials are we giving our kids to read? It can't be Babe Small and whatever. It can't be the Rhinelands. It can't be the Tennessee Valley Authority. When we have landslides in Bududa, and that's our problem. When we have floods in the Rift Valley in Kenya, and that's our problem. When we have the oil mining in Uganda that is failing to take off, and we have wars that are not ending in DRC, the political issues, and we have the colonial overload, we still have the neo-colonialism, the World Bank, those photocopied programs, the blueprint they spread all over Africa and tell us those are the economic development projects we should follow. We still can't call ourselves the education system when we are still being fed on that stuff, and we call it, the advanced material. No wonder even our kids can't function in workspace. What happens in workspace in Uganda? What are we producing? If you take me to a factory to produce matoke, I will surely function because I've seen matoke ever since I was born and I've grown up. So I have that knowledge, and if I am a biochemist, I can even apply that knowledge to develop matoke into an exporting product because I know it. I know how it tastes when it's good. I know how to preserve it. So I can add on that local information I have and add on the basic science I've acquired from school and develop something useful from that matoke or the milk I've grown up seeing. Over to you, Lynn.
All right. Indeed. Thank you so much, Miriam. We have Dr. Dels Kamunyu, who's just joined us. We have been waiting for you. Thank you for joining us. And we welcome you to the show. Quickly, the question here is to you, Doctor. You are an educator. In fact, I could just briefly talk about you. He is Dr. Dels Kamunyu Muhwezi. He is former Mwasa, Makerere University Academic Staff Association chairperson. He's now member of the University Council. He's a lecturer, Department of Forestry, Biodiversity and Tourism, Makerere University, but he has been in it for a long time. He studied here and studied abroad. Dr. Kamunyu, in your view, what is wrong with our education system? And why do people always run abroad to further their studies? Why is it hard to do that within the country? Francis, I want to come back to you. Why do you think we have many people furthering their studies abroad? Because everyone who wants to further their studies, they're told, don't do it in Uganda. It won't make sense.
Hello, Lynn?
Yes, Francis, yes.
Yes, thank you. I think it is simple. Right away, even when we say we want to transform our education system, everything is based on infrastructure, basic infrastructure. Like Miriam has just talked about libraries. That is basic infrastructure. Now, those who want to go and study from abroad, yes, much as we acquire Western education, which may also to some extent be dysfunctional back home because it is also tailored to solving their problems or to answering certain questions in their society. But there is basic infrastructure. Let's go. I have had the privilege of teaching in Uganda from nursery up to higher institutions of learning. And so, because how Miriam has said, if we don't have the basic infrastructure, and which I all say the will of government. I was reading some news where you find people are teaching under trees, for example. And here is a team of fishermen. They are sharing iron sheets and going to roof their farms.
Mm.
Do you think, Lynn, that you can deal with these people to transform the education system? Do they think about the problems of society and how we can best solve them? The answer is no. Do you think then they can invest in saying, okay, how do we equip local publishers? How do we equip local researchers? Like what Miriam was talking about, that who is there to go and study the society and then writes a book, and another person also writes a book, and so on, and we understand our own society and the challenges that are there, and then we solve those problems. Like, for example, how do we also understand, I will go back to like how our parents used to brew local beer. Like, a person who has studied, what value can they add to that local beer, and it is more advanced, because that is a Uganda beer. What are we going to add to our millet? So all these, it will work on the local infrastructure that is there. My mother used to use a grinding stone, but now the science would be, my brother who has done whatever engineering would be saying, okay, what is that science that the grinding stone was using that I can build on in my engineering knowledge, and then make a grinding stone that maybe will be run on power? I'm not saying these things are not there, but I'm saying the local infrastructure. So we talk about, I will go back, you still remember the scandal that was on when they were laying an internet cable, a fake one for Uganda, and internet ended up not being stable. So if we are to say an e-library, it would build on that basic infrastructure. Do you still remember during COVID, when they said that they can supply radios to each and every family? I don't know whether they were also going to give them batteries because of poverty, so that the children can, even there is a TV radio program somebody is teaching. But if they were thinking, that was a good positive thinking, but where did the radios end? So these would be simple and basic infrastructures that would help us, but they are not there. But then it now comes, I agree with Allimadi when he said the student who wrote, now there is protest. Generally, this student was telling us, we who are adults, that look here, we are fed up, raise up, come and help us, join us, and we see how we push the fishermen out of our way, so that the education system serves a local Ugandan. And that has always been our plea. So to me, I believe there is a lot to overhaul, but you can't do it if the basic infrastructure is not there. And for us to begin with, the leadership, because that is basic. I know the technical people that we have advised, but the political will is ill, and nothing can move. I know the doctor here from Makerere. I don't think that if he wanted to go and make research about something in society, of course involving his students, that the government will give him money. And yet the only way we can transform our education system is through research that is African based or Ugandan based. But the basic is Not until this basic infrastructure is put in place that we can raid on to be able not only to explore our capabilities as Ugandans or as Africans, but also to be able to compete. And then we see other countries or other economies, they are coming also to learn from us.
Right.
We can borrow it from China. How did China do it? It had to first study its own system, and then they localized it to their own problems. And then now, you see what they are. Everybody will be saying, oh, the Chinese are good at doing this. The Chinese are good at doing this. Yes, even when sometimes you may study from here, you have the skills, but you go back home, there is no basic infrastructure that you would use to apply the skills. So you do, in one way or another, either you are smartly dressed going nowhere, or if the government was functional, then you tell them, okay, I need this basic infrastructure, and then we can use it as the launching pad for us to move to the next step. I told you, like, think of agriculture. I think in the whole world, Africa would be the best producers of organic food. And how much Allimadi and Miriam, you know how costly organic food is here if you wanted to eat healthy, and would be champions in that. So I think Lynn, the greatest question to answer in all this is the political will. Once we get the political will right, I'm telling you, we have good technical people, but of course they have also been eaten up by corruption. That would be a conversation for another day. How do we root out corruption from, even including institutions of learning like Makerere? You have seen what they have been going through. And you also see how professors who have been trading marks for money and sex.
Right.
I will not hesitate to say that. And then once we root out, we clear all these, like I would end up by saying, the current Minister of Education that we have, what can she do for our country? Does she also understand education herself anyway? So let me not take that route. If we need to do that, it shall be a political conversation in terms of education and politics. Thank you, Lynn.
Absolutely, Francis. Thank you indeed. Talking about our research and archives, somebody wrote to the president recently and said, allow me bring to your humble attention that Uganda apparently has Uganda National Records and Archives Center that is located in Wandegea. It is supported by centers like Makerere University Main Library that hosts key government archival materials. There is, however, no single regional national archival branch in the country to gather rich archival materials in Uganda's regional zones to supplement the national center. This, I just speak because we're talking about the research and why people really leave the country to go abroad to further their education. Because in Uganda, you can only study up to senior 6 and then you start hustling, looking for a job. Now, this doctor, I beg your pardon, Milton, I come to you say, doctor, apologies, we keep calling you doctor, because I think you must have obtained some doctorate somewhere.
It's all good, my friend. Don't worry about it.
So Milton, we are looking at all these problems affecting our education system. And Francis, yourself have alluded to the fact that we need a political change. You need a change in politics. Maybe it could address the education problems. But how about we look at the technicalities involved? We are looking at, first of all, there's a lack of enough, teachers for the students. We're not paying them enough. We do not have that. Now it is more science-based. We do not have enough equipment for the students to learn the science studies. There's a whole lot. So if we look at the politics of it, how about we take the politics out first? What can we deal with?
Well, it is quite not possible, actually. The technicalities, it goes hand in hand with the politics. The will has to be there because When we talk about lack of resources, it means it's a lack of priorities. We don't have shortage when it comes to spending on the armed services. We have jet fighters, we have tanks, we have armored personnel carriers, we have all the equipment for the people that are in the armed forces. And that's, by the way, it's not just a Ugandan problem. As you know, the United States spends almost $1 trillion on its military every year. Trillion with a T, which means if their priority was correct, every student in this country should be able to get free education from grade school through college and come out without any debt. Instead, they come out owing tens of thousands of dollars. But they're in a better position to manage because the economy is larger. The level of income is much higher. We cannot afford that. And yet we are not prioritizing education. You know, we have the resources because what is the evidence? We're spending on the military. If we put the appropriate percentage in education, the system would be much better. So it goes back to the political will. What does the current ruling establishment really want to do for Uganda? And also, we must not hesitate to mention that it is actually easier to govern and to rule a country where the people are relatively not politically conscious. And consciousness comes from education. So there's also a political advantage to the ruling class not to have a highly educated society, which would be much more difficult to govern because they would be able to articulate their demands better, to organize better, to improve the political conditions in the country. So unfortunately, they go hand in hand. So it's we can't say it's possible to take the politics out of the education. And I just want to mention a few other things that my colleagues have said in terms of libraries. And I think that is a very good thing that, Miriam is bringing it up. We could have mobile libraries. We could have mobile libraries that come to even the most remote areas, even once a week. Give them library cards, and they can even take the material out. And when the mobile vehicle comes back to their community, they come back and they exchange for new books or for new materials. So I think that is something we need to push. Here in New York City alone, just New York City, we have 217 libraries. Just imagine, I have a map, and sometimes on weekends, I say, this weekend, I want to go to this library for the first time. I've not been to all the libraries yet in New York, and yet I've been living here for decades in New York City, you see? Local libraries, and then they have 5 research libraries. So research is very important, as Francis mentioned. And also, Miriam mentioned the aspect of the World Bank and the IMF. And these are not neutral agents. In fact, one of the conditionalities to get a loan from the World Bank is that you do not subsidize healthcare and you do not subsidize education. So this is really like a suicidal approach to developing African countries. How can you not subsidize education? And this is the thing that can uplift the majority of Africans from impoverishment. Good quality education as well as good quality healthcare. And then Francis also mentioned something very practical. Agriculture. Why don't we have specialized schools proliferating all over the country to train our students in commercial agriculture? It's something that is becoming a very big thing in Ghana now, where in fact now young people see that instead of being idle in the cities or getting a degree and not having a job, they can be engaged in profitable agriculture. And we need to focus on this. Africa collectively imports $35 billion of food from the outside world on an annual basis. Just think about that. And it can be done. We can transform our societies. And I go back once again to the example that Francis gave. In 1959, the per capita income of China was $90 per head, 90 US dollars. And this is according to World Bank statistics. Ghana was almost 200, about 189 or something like that. So we are talking about Ghana's per capita income being double of China as recent as 1959. Today, of course, Ghana, while one of the best performing economies in Africa, it has its challenges, but its per capita income is maybe about 2,500 or more. Way, way higher than Uganda's, which is about 800. But China today is a superpower. China's per capita income is more than 15,000. China is industrialized now. And China did not depend on the IMF or World Bank in order to transform itself like that. Otherwise, it would still be in the similar position as most African countries are. So Miriam is right. Many of the challenges are domestic, but some of them are also external. We are under the control of these institutions like the World Bank and the IMF, who say, yes, we will give you $1 billion, but these are the things you cannot do, and these are the things you can do. So we need the political will to stand up to this and say, no, we want to transform our societies, and these are our priorities. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Milton. Finally, we have Dr. Dels Kamunyu. Please, we'll ask you to unmute and say hello to us. We are speaking the education system, and we are wondering, do we need to overhaul the education system? Because there are people who are saying it is it's not satisfactory. It is not delivering what it was set out to deliver. It is not competitive enough. It is not enough for our generations. And so I ask you, as a teacher, as a lecturer, as an educator, what do you make of our education system? Does it need an overhaul? Right. I think we will give him a minute, perhaps. Miriam, yes. We have moved, and I was trying to tell you that actually we have a library that is operational. Old as it might be, it is the National Archives and the library. It is there. It needs a lot of work, a lot of it actually. And this is why I was asking, and actually partly Francis answered, because it seems most students or most people leave the country to study abroad because there's better opportunities, especially in research and the like. However, I still wonder, why do we have the best education institutions in the country? For example, Makerere University. And yet people would rather have something from abroad because it carries some sort of weight. Other people have gone to Ghana, Nigeria to study. What do they have that we do not have?
Lynn, it's no secret that someone studying abroad, of course, is gonna get a more valuable, I don't know how to call it. It could be like you are more informed than someone who's gonna, not everyone, but most of the people who study locally, the issues we raised, the lack of infrastructure, you don't have enough facilities to enable you explore enough content that you could if you go to countries like South Africa, which has well-equipped academic institutions. And that's a fact. And how do we change that? Can we invest in our education system? How many research projects are funded by Ugandan government in Makerere University? How many research projects are funded by Uganda government in Mbarara University of Science and Technology? How many research projects are funded by Ministry of Finance in MOBS, in Ministry of Finance and Economic Development in MOBS, the business school, the leading business school, which would enable the Ugandan student researchers to connect with the Ugandan government policy making. I remember when I was studying public administration in my university, Syracuse University. It has one of the leading political science schools in USA. I remember the programs that were formulated in Washington were dry run through students, through research by students to see if they're gonna work. So they would bring us, say, these are the programs in the pipeline, the policy changes. And they would put them, they would try them through students and see if they're gonna function before they implement them. And what do Ugandans do? For us, we wait for World Bank to bring us their cooked and served and almost stale material. World Bank professionals know nothing about Uganda, to be honest. And if they know anything, they think Africa is one kind of case, like one case, like they all bundle us. Whether you are Uganda, Kenya, South Africa, you are one entity, you are one and the same. So they get these standardized projects, one fit all kind of thing. Like you create a school uniform and say, if you are not large, you are small. And the color is red or white. But Uganda is totally different from Kenya. And even if Uganda has issues of landslide like Kenya would, and we have the Karamoja, they have the Pokot, we are not the same, and our politics is different. Our socioeconomic setup is different. So the two policies one same policy can't work on these two regions at the same time. But what are we doing to rectify that? Nothing. What are we using the professionals in Makerere? Politicking. If they see someone is a very good professor, they are critiquing, not criticizing per se, but they are trying to analyze or critique any government project. Then they pick you up, they make you a RDC somewhere, and you die there. All your potential and your capacity to do something just ends there. And even if you are a trained economist and you can do some changes in the Ugandan Ministry of Finance and Planning, if you don't support NRM, you can't appear anywhere. Nobody's gonna pick you up. So we prefer that they see politicking over quality. And then if we see quality that is really provoking us or challenging us to perform better, we'd rather destroy it than encourage it and learning from it. And those are some of the things that are really setbacks, especially when it comes to these other 40 years we've spent with NRM. I don't know how educational resources and experts were utilized under Obote and Amin. I haven't researched that, but what I see under NRM is that whether you are an expert of whatever grade, if you don't support NRM, nobody's gonna listen to you. Nobody's gonna give you the audience you deserve, or even pick anything from you. So and like Francis said, that the politics are a hindrance to everything, because I mean the fish gets spoiled from the head, and the people they are putting in the ministry today. If you are to be allocated in a ministry, I hear it's about how much funding goes to that ministry. If you are a big lady, I mean you are given the the one with a big budget, and maybe that's how she ended up being a minister of education. But what does she know about education, and how is she concerned about education? What developments have happened in education ever since NRM came to power? What I see is, I mean, in the past, it's like the educated people were preferred. If we go to Idamin picked quality to run the government institutions rather than the quantity. I mean, the political allegiances and all that. So he would but he destroyed the academic institution, so I don't want to dwell on that. But we can go back to picking quality. We have very few and very professional Ugandans who are in Uganda and who can make really big changes in our economy and our education system, but we don't give them the audience and the resources they need to do that. We don't give them the space they need to do that. Uganda is the only country which doesn't have like a national think tank. We don't have national planning. If you go to UK, you're gonna find like the Chatham House. The people have spaces where they think for that their nations. But in Uganda, we wait we wait for a handout from World Bank, a handout from White House, a handout from UK, and that's what we call our national policy. So all those things, I mean, we can go back to structuring our education system, but if we don't structure the policies and the political institutions which would implement the changes and the transformation, nothing much can be done. There is a point I wanted to highlight. It was to complement what Milton had said, like we need to localize our education. We cannot re-emphasize the use of our local languages in our education. It's so good to speak English or Mandarin or French or whatever, and but how is that going to help you develop Karamoja? It's gonna help you if you want to really leave Uganda and run away. And it's like in Uganda there's like everybody's trying to run away from Uganda, but why? But if you want to develop Uganda, you should know what the language that people speak in order to communicate to them, in order to learn from them, in order to know them and see how to work with them and transform each other. And that would be emphasized. Are we publishing in our local languages? Are we encouraging publishers to writers and scholars to develop our local languages, to research them? And it's also another case of funding. Where are we putting our money? You know, they say that and whatever your wishes are followed by your wallet. If you are not interested in education, you will never fund it, and it needs real funding. There is no country, there is no institution in the world which can develop without good education.
Yes, indeed. Milton is writing in the chat room and he says, the World Bank staff are mostly contemptuous of African solutions. Yeah, true. Very true there. But I want to just, I come back to you, Francis, as we begin to finalize. Unfortunately, I think we couldn't connect with Dr. Dels Kamunyu, perhaps next time. Dr. Chrysostom Manyingo, who is the State Minister for Higher Education, says the government is trying to, that. I was saying that the State Minister for Higher Education says the government has realized this difference in improving the country's education system, and they're trying to lay a proper foundation for the country's learners. That is why they're working on a framework to regulate the teaching of children in early childhood development education. Now, starting at the nursery level, amidst these efforts, the government also continues to try and address challenges affecting the provision of universal education and all that. Francis, what I'm trying to ask you here is, and as we start to wind up really, are we really focused on our education system as a government? Does it bother us that it is, it is downplayed by many, by global actors? And every time you have a degree from Uganda, they'll ask you, I think you need some more. That's not enough. And as a government, if we are we have policies in place, we have strategies in place, we have frameworks in place, numerous. I'm telling you, every other time they're developing a framework and they're launching it. Why are we not implementing these beautifully put together frameworks, for example?
Thank you, Lynn. I think, Lynn, I'll keep answering this. In one statement, I'll just tell you, like as I have said, and I'll continue saying it. Those frameworks are good. The political will is ill, and nothing can move. Everything is wrapped in that. Lynn, believe me, I'll give you a good example. We are sorry to compare like developed countries and our country. Whenever there is a problem or something that they want to bring in into the education system, the developed countries, they trust universities and they go into research so that they should be able to make informed decisions. But in most cases where you find, I'm not saying the politicians see it, because they heard of something that worked in Sweden, and then they copy and paste without having our experts back home dive deeper in understanding exactly is how do we tailor it to our society. And then when it comes, it evolves organically. And then you find we are moving into the right direction. As Allimadi said, but if you just go because the IMF has said, or the World Bank, those conditions, that you just get it, not only because you know what you want, but because they have said so. Like, I will give you an example. For Cameroon, when the IMF, I think, and World Bank asked them to close all teacher training institutions, and they went ahead and closed them. And currently they are into a crisis. Now they are starting what they would call in-service programs. You see such? But if people just realize and say, okay, what do we need? And I will go back. I'm telling you, not until we address the political question. Like, if you ask me, it was good for the science teachers to be enumerated highly. But was it the best approach to do? The answer is no. If I were the one, I would say, okay, look here. We have so much money that we are investing into science. The science teachers, once you have projects you want to do, you have research that you want to carry out, to encourage them. You have certain things that you want to do with your student and come up with an innovation. There is so much money, and you would see how. But even if you pay a person, a scientist, there is no basic infrastructure. Even if you pay them 1 trillion Ugandan shillings, nothing will change. The products will remain the same. Cram and reproduce even what you don't know. For example, I know that the symbol for water is H2O. But if you ask me to explain further, I don't know. It is, that's how shall be, world to come, and so on. How it is derived, I don't know, but I know for sure it is H2O. So, Lynn, I will still insist that to me, I believe the policies you are talking about and frameworks is like as how you can wash your linen white and so on, then you go and put it on sand or dust. It's where you are drying it. Then it will not give you the results that you need.
Of course.
So that's why we have to ask the right question for us to be able to get the right answer. That's why I told you that we have to have the right people in leadership to work with the technocrats that we need so that we produce the right thing. I'll give you an example. When I came here to study, all my education was paid by a professor whom I was working for as a research assistant and even helping him in the classes. When I look back and look at the work that I was doing for him, I also thank myself. I said, I did this. Then I asked, it is the same brain that I had when I was in Uganda. Why wasn't this possible? Simple, basic infrastructure. Now, when this professor identified me and knew that I had a knowledge, because in Uganda I have been in inclusive education, which was also resisted at first by Minister of Education for some good years, then linked me to disability services for students at Western Michigan University. So they told me, you have a vast experience in inclusive education. So I was a very huge resource in that area. And they would tell me, Francis, you have this, you can carry out experiments. What we need is our students with disabilities to succeed. And I had also to apply the very skills that in Uganda I would argue with UNEM, I would argue with the Minister of Education. Now here, they would say, okay, what do you want? How do you think this problem can be solved? I tell them, if we do this, this, and this, they say, there is no problem. We are going to try it out. If it works, well and good. If it doesn't work, then we'll... And like that. And I felt like in Michigan, I was in Uganda, I was feeling home because they were supporting me, where they were saying, okay, here I think you missed here. Again, do this, real guidance. And I would also look at what I do and I say, yes. While in Uganda, I'll give you an example. There is when Minister of Education, they came through the commissioners on a school where we are carrying out inclusive education, and they told me, Francis, we would like to support this school and give you more students. I said, no problem. And then they told me, you know, for us as government, a child with a disability, we only pay for them, was it 5,000 and something a year? I said, look at these jokers. A child who is blind uses a Parkinson's braille of 3.5 millions. And then you say you want some of those children to come at the school, and then you are paying 5,000, I don't know, 200 and something a year. I said, look at this. You are just joking. Which cannot buy even 2 pieces of braille paper, which cannot buy even a white cane for this child. And then you go and hear, what is it, for example, that a certain permanent secretary in the ministry of whichever ministry is going to do, who sleeps at Chireka and comes to town in office, to qualify to use a car of 500 millions? How many parking braille machines would that buy? How many libraries, local libraries, would that establish? If how many primary school teachers would that money pay or to beep their salary that would encourage them? For example, how many, if we were to go at a basic level, at a primary level, we can encourage them to be practical and make experiments. How many experiments, for example, children in primary 5, they are going to learn about the parts of a chicken. How many chicken would it buy to give to each primary school for a science teacher to open the chicken, and then they see the digestive system of a chicken? They see maybe all parts. So we have to really, if we are to think and transform, but we can write and write and write and write those frameworks, but nothing will come out. It would be like using a tape measure to measure intelligence. Yes, it will give you consistent results. Every time you wrap it around your head, it will tell you it is maybe 4.5 inches. But is it the appropriate tool to measure intelligence? It can be reliable. It will give you a consistent result, but it is not valid. So, in other words, we have to get the right question that we need to answer. That is one. Then we have to get the political will right, and then the rest can follow. Otherwise, we have experts, we have brains that we can put together and come up with what we need to do. Even if we overhaul it right now, without basic infrastructure, without the right political will, we are smartly dressed going nowhere. Thank you.
Right. True.
Fantastic. I think, Francis, this is going to become your slogan. We are smartly dressed going nowhere. But finally, I'm glad Dr. Dels Kamunyu can be seen and heard. Dr. Dels, you have been talking about our education system, and because we are nearing the conclusion of our conversation, I wanted to ask you, we don't want to let you go without saying anything. Do tell us, what do you make of our education system, and does it need an overhaul? And where are we headed with it?
I don't know if you can hear me now. Is it? I must apologize. I tried to connect, and I've just sent a text to Miriam that if at Africa's premier university, I can't connect easily to Zoom call, then there must be some real challenges that are for sure evident. The dilemma of education is not one that me and you can discuss and conclude in a way that we want, because to me, right from the beginning, it's messy, because education evolves with community, and it's probably, to me, some kind of knowledge system. You can call it tradition, you can call it what, but we cannot have a so-called perfect formal education system without understanding informal education. And that's where we make a mistake. And I've been keen at reading these things and trying to understand them, because most of the time we reason formal education in isolation of informal education. And then we also fail to link the two to a political philosophy that runs that particular community. And whether that political philosophy underpins the kind of education that is needed, formal, informal, to get the results that the political system would wish to have. I don't know whether there is ever linkage. Last week I was in Namibia, visiting Namibia University of Science and Technology, and the same things keep coming up. They have the infrastructure, they have this young technical school, it's vibrant with young people, but they still have the same issues, complaining about the same issues. And I'm deeply reminded of the dilemma of informal education, and whether this formal education is really, really ours, and whether we aren't pretending, and whether democracy, the political system in place, does not mess it up even more, on whether it's not a trap. But that's what creates a dilemma in my life. Back to the education system that I am deeply involved in. The truth is that it's a mess. It's a mess in a way that it's possible for a student to do a degree in microbiology and finish a university education without doing a practical. It's very possible. On whether that is my responsibility or the responsibility of university planners or the responsibility of the country, I am puzzled, because sometimes these funds are released. For example, I'm giving an example, to the university administration, and then when it gets there, you see the priorities about buying a car. This is an erite. This is a professor or an administrator buying a car, and they will reason, no, it's a one-off. We will. Then they do not, and then they really think so deeply and prioritize the practicals. I do not know whether at that point whether Mzungu hides or gives us a Forte microscope. I don't think so. The microscope could be the same as the one used on the streets in the university, Trinity College, where I went in Dublin. But you see, the whole leadership problem, and I keep saying leadership is a joint venture. It's a look. The money is released by government. You can blame them for not supervising, but the professor, and the professor is prioritizing a car, and then at the end of the day, all of us are blaming the one Museveni who is not doing the right thing, as if the professor is an idiot of some kind. And so this is why the whole dilemma of education to me is real, is disturbing. And one could argue, during UPC you had a better way of doing it. I think, yes, to some extent, some level of community organization, some level of community involvement. I remember the classrooms, the parents were involved in education then, just like they were involved in the economic system, the cooperative societies, and it made sense that when the classroom was leaking, the parents came together, went and brought some, or even sometimes bought, or even informed the community leader, and it was fixed. Today, it's a puzzle. It's capitalism. It's sensationalism. It's buying. It's window dressing. It's lying. there's no sense of community. The parents drop their kids and don't even care what they learn there. It's a whole failure of leadership from the bottom to the top. And that's why those who argue that possibly we must deal with the political question, I tend to agree with them. But probably at this point, and maybe a message to Airites is that with the opportunity of democracy and this level of freedom, which is not perfect, we can also go down and begin to teach and improve civic competence. Because without appropriate civic competences, the politicians also won't do anything, because they are already in the business of stealing iron sheets of what they are since they are, what can I call it? There's some anxiety. It's dramatization. And without addressing that, we won't get anywhere. We'll keep in these talks. We will get angry. We will do all. And maybe to end with, because I came in late and I'm also not okay because I kept connecting. I went to a school called St. Joseph's. It was in Mbarara. It was a German model school. And in that school, and I appreciate, and I've always said, why didn't government see this as a solution to our problems? It's even not supposed to be expensive. In that school, we were not only doing the national curriculum and excel in it, but we were also doing metal works. We were doing building and construction. We were being practical agriculture, preparing gardens. We were being taught how to prepare fertilizers from local materials. We weren't elitist only. We were also useful. As a result, most of the young people who unfortunately dropped out at S4, at S3, most of them became very successful builders. Some of them were practicing successful agriculture. Some of them went into metalworks. And some are successful, including doing, because look, from S1 to S4, you are studying building. You are, by S4, you are much far better than someone who finished elitist education to S4 and did 2 years of technical school. You are much better off. And I kept asking, and then over time, that was watered down. Now the school is like any other school. And people come out speaking English and all confusion and reasoning. But the basics could not be seen. Up to date, no one can see those basics. And how this very beautiful school, conceived by one bishop, Kakubi the late, very practical, including getting some of the best doctors I have known. The school used to send some students to pharmacy courses. One of the head of COVAX, Deus Mubanjizi, is my OB. Very smart, but with a theme also on ethics, because it was started to train responsible laity Catholic leaders in every vocation, meaning we are ethical, we are responsible, we are open-minded also. But I see arguments and complicating education that is supposed not to be complicated. And probably I end with what my young French philosopher usually tells me. Who told Africans that proper education is supposed to be gotten in a very complicated building, very complicated spaces, with a powerful person called a professor or teacher, who told Africans this, that maybe under a tree with very, very good teacher, we can have one child delivered to deliver their own community. And more than ever before, I believe them. I believe in informal education, connecting with formal education, and that the two subsidize each other and create a potent community enlightenment system. And that this can also be underpinned by a correct political philosophy. I'm sorry I came in late, but I believe I would probably have contributed. I'm trying to summarize what was in my head. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Honestly. But we're glad you at least gave us a minute with us. Now, as we wind up, gentlemen and lady, I'll come back to you later if we have a minute. Milton, as we conclude, so then what? What do we do? Because we have all these underlying problems, we have all these questions that we might never have answers to. And you go on to say that we need to change the political system, rather the politics. We need to work around the politics to make sure that everything else falls in place. Then what?
As the professor just suggested, Professor Kamunyu, we can't wait for the correct political environment to materialize. Eventually it will, because, many of us are working toward that. But in the meantime, there are things we can do. So, for example, me together with my siblings, it's something that I started actually, first of all, in the memory of my late sister, Barbara Allimadi's name, because that's what she wanted to do, to start a foundation to help students in Uganda. She specifically wanted to focus on young girls. So right now, we are sponsoring 4 young ladies who graduated secondary school, and now they're in universities in Uganda, including Makerere as well. We pay for their housing, their tuition, provide them laptops, transport, allowance, when they're not in school. And I think more of us need to do that. Of course, many people back home get the impression that if you're overseas, the money is just dropping from the trees. That's not the case. But it's a sacrifice that it is worth it, because this is our country at the end of the day. And we want to invest in the young people who are going to be the future leaders. So I'm saying this, that if we know people who are in a position to sponsor students in Uganda, please adopt a student, pay for them to get their education, to get their college education. And then on a broader level, and this is a conversation perhaps for a different platform, we need to have an African university of the highest class that is financed by all the African governments. A African Union University, for example, whatever name we give it. It can be in Addis, it can be in Accra, it can be in Johannesburg, or wherever it's located. But it's financed collectively by all the African countries. We produce the best graduates on an annual basis. Each African country can nominate the students that they're going to be sending to that university to get their university education. And that is something we need to all push collectively to. So I think this has been a very, very productive conversation. We should have more of this type of conversations on a regular basis. So thank you for having this conversation today.
Absolutely. Thank you, Milton. Miriam, conclusively, as we wind up on this, what do we do next? Because really, we have a huge problem and everybody's pointing to it. All the panelists have pointed to it. But we can only do so much.
I think to add on to what Dr. Kamunyu and Milton have said, it starts with us. How much can you do for your community? He talked about sponsoring a student or two, but again, there are smaller issues you can do. For instance, the community libraries. Are many groups, like if we have strong graduates, Dr. Kamunyu talked about St. Joseph's Vocational School, which has produced very important Ugandans today who are doing different jobs. How much are these people going back to their community or their school to give back to that school, or to help the young generation also progress in academic and other information, other career-related projects? It doesn't have to be only career-related, like, you see these career meetings people hold, and then they call the old boys, old girls, come and talk to the people. But what are you contributing? Do you go there to teach a class one day? Do you send them books? Do you what have you done to your village apart from cruising there over Christmas and then cruising back? Can you give them a bus to build a mobile library that Milton talked about? If you are a doctor, for instance, can you channel some of your knowledge about, say, the basic health to your LC1 village? There is so much we can do on a personal level. There is so much the leadership can do, like we've discussed, but it takes all of us. Like, we are the ones. When I was looking at the incident about the MPs that stole the relief aid to Karamoja, I was thinking to myself, do these people know the plight of the Karamoja people? What type of school did they go to? I mean, you can be a thief, but can you steal from a dying person? Can you steal from a starving person? And then you still call yourself a leader. So there are things we can do even at a personal level. If say that minister, say Prime Minister was taken to Karamoja, and that's where she did her O level, her A level, I'm not sure she would have stolen the iron sheets from Karamoja. We need to do much more about regional integration and trying to educate people beyond the classroom. Like, can you be I was surprised. I was beating myself. Say, I come from Western Uganda, from Bushenyi, but I know nothing about Kasese. How many miles are they from Bushenyi to Kasese? I really learned about the Bakonso community when when Museveni attacked them in 2017. Was it 2016? So if that happens tomorrow and I appointed a minister of Kasese region, what can I do to those people for them? What can I do for them? Because I don't know nothing about them. And why is that? Why is it that we don't even know about ourselves? Why is it that I know so much about which place? Let me see, Rhineland, which I studied I had to cram for my A-level exams. But I know nothing about Bududa. I know nothing about Kitgum. I know nothing about the irrigation project in Sudan. So, like Allimadi has said, we really need African University. We need, as we Africans, as we African leaders, our leaders, we need to refocus our energy on what works for Africa. We need to stop this photocopying this and copy paste kind of solution, firefighting kind of stuff to patch into our education. We need to refocus what works for us. If our languages serve us much better, why do we need English to teach a Ugandan student? If you can teach in Uganda, if you can teach in Swahili, do you need English really? If they can learn English as a language, good for them. But if not, why not? Why should you be bothered? If you learn, you are Ugandan and you are going to work in Uganda, that's good enough and it should serve you well. So those are things we can do we can do so much at the personal level. We can do so much at the community level. We can do so much at the leadership level. But our leaders, like Francis has said, and he has left us, I think, it takes the leadership finally. So we can only do so much, but the leaders finally, the buck stops with them.
Okay. All right, Miriam, let me take a look at what's in the chat room. Francis says, I'll drop the call to catch up with the next appointment. Thank you, Francis, for your time. And he says, we need a debate on education and politics. I agree with you. Milton says, you need to write an article about that stealing from dying people. I think that is to you, Miriam. Yes, you need to. It would be very fantastic. He goes on to say, my students of John Jay College ask me all the time when I teach them African history, Professor, why didn't I learn any of this in my country? They could be from Senegal, Ghana, and Nigeria, because some African people think by speaking the Queen's English, I have arrived. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Absolutely. Dr. Dels, I don't know, we have a minute. If you have anything that you think you can add, and then we can call it a day.
Yeah, I thank you for inviting me today. It's unfortunate that I didn't make a good contribution to this discussion, but I had issues. For example, I have strong belief that we must fire up informal education. Parents must get involved in education. Education, a potent education system is not supposed to be very expensive. That's why until even in the 1900s, early 1900s, there was no formal education in some countries. And yet they were making steps, meaning informal education is more powerful, and that without parents getting involved, nothing much can happen. We can't, then that means formal education would be like a factory line, trying to manufacture children, trying to get certain things. And I can understand, especially if you are you desire to transform society very fast. But beyond that, I think our current education system delays maturity of our young people, and it delays skilling, it divorces them from the traditional knowledge systems, it divorces them from what their parents did to educate them, it keeps pushing them away from agriculture, pushes them away from traditional medicine, it pushes them away from what really makes them survive as a people. And then you begin to wonder whether whoever is organizing this education is really in their normal senses. Because, and then also, of course, the attitude of our parents, of course, that can also be worked on. Miriam knows I had an exchange last night with someone, and I also did, and I slept late. I was chatting with Miriam, that an Erite who thinks that giving old clothes to a community in Shema or in Kabare or in Soroti, thinking that it's a way to make our people happy, is the one on the driving seat of our education. I have insisted, I do not agree with that. Maybe if that money could be saved of buying so many clothes, and you invest in their circle, and then you take off time every after 2 months to go and teach them how to use their land, how to do fertilizers, how to increase productivity, how every parent should plan for their family and feed their child. Maybe that's better contribution by an Erite than just spending time gathering clothes to go. It undermines me. Even I know they are like in an emergency situation. It's like hospice. They need some care, but this anxiety is not going to take us anywhere. We will lose direction. That a whole elite is spending time gathering old clothes to go and distribute them, and I think they are making, yes, I can understand you, but that's our dilemma. And I'm talking on the side of informal education, and that the wrong mindset is in charge, and that crooked Erites are in charge, full of anxiety and running around and doing all sorts of false things, and think they are the things that we should do, including those who are dumping Western systems on us. All this anxiety can only be underpinned by a correct political philosophy at the end of the day. And don't forget that leadership is a joint venture.
Right. Fantastic. Thank you so much. Miriam, thank you. Milton, thank you. Francis. And Milton here is reminding you, Dr. Dels, that you actually made powerful comments on uniting the formal and the formal education. We need appropriate education. So you contributed, even when you came late. It was very fantastic. I wish you the very best of the weekend. Thank you so much. And we hope to catch you again, because I think I think Miriam will have something else to continue this conversation on education and politics. Yes, we'll be definitely do that some other time. I wish you all a lovely weekend, and God bless you.